Hello and welcome to the Projector Stories podcast. My name is Sarah. I'm a 1-3 emotional projector.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Laura. I'm a 5-1 splitting projector, and I always feel really silly. I feel like I'm some sort of ridiculous TV show cartoon host or something whenever I say that. I don't know how to say it in like a normal voice.
We're still working out some kinks, folks, with our intro. But no, I mean, I get it. I'm not used to, having a little mechanical intro either. But alas, this is what people do in podcast world. I mean, we could start just totally random, but this works for now. It's good enough for now. So yeah, in this podcast, we go on tangents. First and foremost, we're both 1156. Well, we both have the 1156 channel of storytelling, which is an abstract channel connecting the ajna to the throat. And so we both have that kind of abstract, right-minded storytelling quality to the way that we relate to each other and talk and things that we find interesting. So, other than that, Laura, has there been anything interesting that has befallen you and your mind this week?
Several things. I'll start off with something rather trivial, which with us is anything ever trivial. But it's freesia season, and freesias are one of my favorite flowers for their aroma. Are you familiar with them, Sarah?
I'm familiar with the word, but like I can't recall what they smell like.
It's like, for me, they're not my favorite because of aesthetics. They're fine aesthetically, but like they smell like Fruit Loops, but perfumey Fruit Loops. Some varieties are like extra commercial, I would say, and have that very strong Fruit Loop aroma, but some are just more natural smelling and floral. But for me, like, they are the most potent flora, and I'm pretty sure my environment, not cognition, but the tone in my environment is smell. So for or is it, no, it's taste. Just kidding, it's taste, it's not smell. Scratch that. I thought my environment tone was smell. But anyways, I love them for their aroma because they are so potent that you just put one in a room and like the entire room will smell like that flower, which is weird. Because my mother cannot smell them for whatever reason. She is super, super, super sensitive to smell. I'm not sure if her tone is smell, but there's no smell for her for them. But that's besides the point. I bring it up because I have them in my garden and they're beginning to bloom. So I'm like throwing them in every bedroom of the house so everyone can enjoy the smell of freesias. And it made me think about gardening as a projector. It's March, and I had intended, as my empty sacral center tends to do, well, not empty, but undefined sacral center. I intended to get started on the garden earlier this year in January, but it's been very rainy and that puts off the desire to do garden work. But even on the sunny days, I haven't wanted to garden. And lo and behold, 2 months have passed and I have not really accomplished much, and I have not started seeds. And I was just thinking about myself as a gardener when I started gardening, which I think was in 2016. Um, and it was from an investigative perspective. I was into astrology and I hated gardening my entire life, even though as a second grader or third grader, when you do like the whole about you presentation in class and you have to make a poster about yourself and say what you want to be when you grow up, at some point I wanted to be a farmer. Don't remember those days, but from that point until like 2016, I've loved gardening and hated it with a fervor. And it was astrology that my sister helped convince me, through astrology, with which my sister helped me start gardening or become interested in it, because she was suggesting like gardening by the moon. And then I did research into it, and Rudolf Steiner was a man, a human being in the early-ish 1900s who did a bunch of research into it with bio gardening and planting certain plants based on the phase of the moon and the sign of the moon and all this stuff. And then that just got me really into gardening. But from 2016 to today, I've since realized I'm a projector and I don't have consistent energy. And it's just fascinating to think about how sometimes we just need generators in our lives to do the heavy lifting of the work for us. Because I would like to garden, like I need to get seeds in pots to like have adequate plants for the summer, to have produce. But my little sacral center does not want to do anything. So I feel like I need to find a generator to get working with me, except I don't trust generators. That's another thing I feel like is true for undefined, I'm using the word empty, but undefined sacral centers. I feel like when it comes to outsourcing our labor with a generator, because of our nature of having an undefined sacral, we tend to be a bit perfectionisty about the work, perfectionisty about the work that we do, because we're going to go above and beyond because we don't know when enough is enough. And so to put that in the hands of someone else who's just going to do what sometimes seems like the bare minimum, but or until the point that they get frustrated or the point that they feel satisfaction, to put it into outsourced hands sometimes is cringy. And I've noticed that with my sister. She asked me to help her with like a generative task today, and she's a reflector. And she didn't ask the generators that way now. She didn't ask my mom. She didn't ask my dad. She didn't ask my brother. No, she asked me to help her do the things I need to get done in her apartment, because it's the whole like recognition of the not knowing when enough is enough quality of sacral centers. I don't know. Have you had that experience, Sarah, where you don't trust generators with
Oh,
generative work?
100%, 100%. No question. No question. No, because it's like I can see how it needs to be done. I don't have the energy to do it, but I know how it's supposed to be done. And so, I mean, nobody, a generator's not going to know how it's supposed to be done. And maybe there are a few generators that are out there that absolutely do, but like by and large, it's not, it's not like, oh, somebody else can do this for me and it's going to be done to the same level or standard that I have. No, I don't really, it's not a trust thing. It's more of just like,
The
I
patience.
just, yeah,
It's
the
like we have to
patience.
have the patience to be willing to ask the yes or no questions of like, hey, do you want to try it this way? Hey, do you want to try this little thing? Or what if you do that? What would happen then? And like you kind of have to micromanage them to get it done the way you want it to get done without making it seem like you're micromanaging them, because you have to ask the yes or no questions for their circle energy to be correctly engaged for them to do the work. And yeah, it's a dance, but it's a demanding dance energetically for us to like do the work of guiding generators. And not like generators have to do the work, so I'm guessing it's exhaustive for them too, but in the end satisfying. But to have to ask a generator a bunch of yes or no questions is demanding. I found it's a lot.
It depends on the generator, of course. It's like going to the right generator for the right thing. Like if there's like I remember my ex-boyfriend who was a generator, Joe, was like super, like he must have had gate 9 and 16 for that matter, because he was so particular, and he had a huge green thumb. And if it was like me expecting him to do the gardening, like, and coming up against it to the standards that I have, like I would 100% guarantee that he would be able to do it well. But organized and things like that. But it's like, it's not everyone that we're meant to guide, and it's not every generator that is going to be able to do the task just because they have the sacral energy for it, right?
Yeah.
So, and just because they're responding with a yes to it. So, yeah, that's super interesting. Also, beautiful about the freesia. I am jealous. It makes me want to cut fresh flowers that I
To
have
have
in my
Fruit Loops
garden.
smell in your home.
Yeah. I mean, and I wonder I'm sorry, what is the tone for environment that's associated with smell?
You can't
Is it
remember
one?
if it's one or two. I'm pretty sure taste is two, so it's one. If you have smell,
I have
tone.
one. Yeah, and it
Oh, you
makes
do.
sense because I'm always burning incense. I always have like or a candle or sage. Like I got this really fancy detergent so that my clothes and my sheets and everything like that always smell really good. like extra good. I have like 10 different perfumes from the same like boutique, little tiny boutique perfumer. Like I'm very smell oriented. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually, because I'm Kate, I'm 1-1. I have tone 1 and I have color 1 on that part. But um so that, and then there was something else that I wanted to say. What were you talking about? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, the idea of smell segues me into something else I wanted to talk about, but I
Okay.
don't want to hog the mic right off the bat. Is there something you want to share about the week? And then I can hop into my other thing later. Or if you can remember what it is that I said that made you think of something you wanted to say.
I can't think of it, so you're gonna have to go ahead, and I'll interrupt you if it suddenly comes over me.
Okay, well, you were talking about smells and perfumes and detergents, and I wanted to
Oh, and
talk
I was
about,
also gonna say that the whole gardening with the moon is super fascinating, very in alignment with your Cancer Mars in the fourth house.
yeah, do you want to know
And
what's funny? That first year I started an experiment and like I kept a log and I was like, okay, I'm gonna plant tomato seeds on this day and this day and this day and this day and see what's gonna happen. And slugs ate all my evidence, so I had nothing to show for it. So I never actually fully proved that gardening by the moon is an effective way to garden. But yeah, I just do it when the mood hits, I guess. It's a gate 5-15 type of thing.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
plants have 15 and humans have 5, and so that is where we kind of meet each other.
Okay.
Plants, oh, well, this is like a fun tidbit that doesn't relate to anything, but plants have personality crystals too, just like us, and design crystals. They are little alive creatures. And I think it's sort of funny, sort of not, sort of ridiculous that vegans are like, you can't harm animals, but like, what about all the plants you're killing and eating? Like, is that not the same? I name my plants, I have relationships with my plants. Like, if someone gifts me a plant, I'm more than likely not gonna like it. I have to go to the store and pick out my own plants, and like I hold them in my hands as I'm walking around the florist shop, not the florist shop, the nursery, holding it, making sure we're a good match before I take that plant home. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters like the personality crystal of the plant. Like, do we get along or not? And at some point I was interested in this and was trying to figure out like when the personality and design crystal enter a plant, because it's different than humans. Like a plant will create seeds, and so you would assume that the design crystal is in those seeds, but because like they are fertile, seeds are fertile. They have both the male and female parts already put together into one. They just need the right environment for them to grow. But for them to grow and for the personality crystal to enter, they need to germinate. And yeah, I was like interested in that because it's very much different than how mammals or other animals reproduce. Just like how do you determine the birthday of a plant to figure out what the body graph looks like, because they don't have the whole 88 days before they're born, the design crystal enters them. And because some plants, they have different designs, some plants have gate 15 and some defined and some don't. And so, and like they have other gates too in their body, not body graphs, but plant graphs, whatever the appropriate term is in their design. Um, and so whether a human being connects with such plant probably has something to do with the mechanics at play of like who has what gate and whether there's a match mechanically, energetically.
Hmm.
But that's a
Interesting.
very, very side tangent. That's not what I wanted to
Yeah.
talk about, but there we go.
Well, you just jogged my memory, so I'm just gonna jump in here really quick. When you were saying that in your childhood you wanted to be a farmer, I'm like, ugh, already the open G conditioning had started. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, of course you didn't want to do that later. You were pressured into deciding what you wanted to be when you were growing, when you grow up, and
Another year I
we're not.
said Britney Spears. So I mean, I
So
get it.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
like
yeah.
as the undefined G, like I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I don't know if I'm ever gonna know, and like no G is ever gonna know because it's just not what we're supposed to be here for. But yeah, undefined G's and having to pick a career, it's a hoot.
It literally gave me such a nervous breakdown in college that I studied. economics and English, and I double majored because I was like, I don't know who I am or what I want to do, and so I just want to go general. But anyway, Laura, I know you were gonna say a second point or a secondary thing that you were thinking about.
Yes. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was hormones, because it's relevant to deconditioning, and fragrances segue into hormones because fragrances affect our hormones. But I was just thinking about how difficult it is as women or humans with uteruses, to be kind to the non-binary folks out there, how difficult it is not to just decondition and deal with the mind, but deal with a mind that fluctuates based on our hormonal well-being. Um, and this is something that I talk about often. Like I said, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I talked about being invited to study about hormonal health for women. And so I learned a lot more than I would have known before. But like, we're constantly exposed to synthetic chemicals, fragrances, just plastics, so many things around us in our environment. If you're like not in the woods by yourself, off being a hermit, that your body is being impacted by the things that are surrounding you, and that affects your well-being. And then your mind is I feel like I'm jumping into the deep end without laying out foundational groundwork, and it's bothering me. I need to lay down the brickwork, the foundation. Can I lecture everyone on like how their hormones work quickly?
Can you?
I mean,
Yes,
I
you
can't quickly. No, I can't lecture them, but I don't know if that'll be good.
Go for it. You got, now everybody's waiting with bated breath for what you're about to say, so you gotta go.
Perhaps. So, well, first I'm gonna say, just like the world around us is constructed in such a way that like we're really not given the things that we need to thrive and survive. And this is kind of like picking a bone with the conventional societal world around us, and like the things we're taught in school. Not to be like very extremely crunchy here, but granola mom, but we're not taught about how our bodies work in health class. Like, we hardly scratch the surface with how our bodies function, and like the value that can be gleaned from knowing how our bodies function is not something that's given to us. And then there's like stuff like taxes and knowing how to manage finances. Like, we're not taught any practical stuff in school. I use algebra all the time when I bake and stuff, and like create sewing patterns. So I do use the math that I've learned, maybe not the advanced calculus or anything, but in terms of like practical wisdom, like we're not given it. And it is severely lacking, and I think needs to be adjusted for like humankind to like thrive better. Anyways, our home hormones, I always forget to pronounce the first R, but hormones, they how much do I want to share? I don't know how many details I want to get into. We have two main hormones, four main hormones that impact our cycle as ladies. And one is estrogen, and that is dominant during the first half of our cycle. And the second is progesterone, and that's should be dominant during the second half of our cycle. But our estrogen, for so many of us, is elevated to extreme levels that impact the homeostasis and symbiosis that should be happening within us, because we are exposed to xenoestrogens, the fragrances, the chemicals, all that increases our estrogen levels. And then our progesterone is unable to correctly produce itself and balance itself inside our bodies because of all the excess estrogen that our body's not able to remove and get rid of adequately enough. And so we're left to be in a state of imbalance internally, which leads to things like PMS, or having difficult thoughts, or being hard on ourselves. Already, the second half, the luteal phase, the first half is called the follicular phase, but the luteal phase is a time in which we're more introspective and less energized. Estrogen gives us energy, so for the first half of our cycle, we're more energized, which is great for, I would say, not just projectors and non-energy beings, but everyone. to have energy to do the things that we would like to do within the month. And then energy tapers off in the second half of our cycles, with the decrease of estrogen and the increase of progesterone. But because of the imbalance, we don't have the right balance of those two things inside of us, and it impacts our mental health severely. And I'm saying this like very, very broad umbrella generalization, but I follow a blind woman on YouTube that I was telling Sarah about, and like she recently posted a video about her experience with PMDD, premenstrual dissociative disorder, depressive disorder,
Dysphoric, I think.
dysphoric disorder. Anyways, like as she was talking about it, she was saying like it's not to do with having your hormones imbalanced. It's just that some people deal with depression during their second half of their cycle, just as a consequence of being a woman. And so imagine like dealing with deconditioning, regardless of what your type is. You're told that you shouldn't initiate from the mind, and your mind is trying to overtake your body and control your decision-making process as you're deconditioning. And it's a struggle to surrender and to not listen to it and to not cave in into the things that it's constantly telling you. And then overlay having womanly hormones on top of that, and then having perhaps a bit of depression or severe introspection or self-criticism and all these things. And you're trying to decondition, and the first half of your cycle, you're in your body, like you have estrogen, you have the energy to just see where your body's taking you, to listen to your body, to go with the flow. But then in the second half, it's like a complete override of your mind on your form. And it's so much more difficult to just go with the flow, or to see where the energy takes you, or to listen to your sacral responses, or to not initiate. And your mind just takes over, and it's not thinking happy thoughts. It's not like it's saying like, yeah, we can initiate, we can do this. It is initiation from really dark, dreary places because of the nature of being a woman. And so I just wanted to talk about the struggle and the sympathy I have for fellow womankind for our deconditioning and our journey into human design, because it is sometimes really difficult, and that's not talked about in the human design space because it's generalized for all humans, and men and women have very different physiology that affects us. So I thought it was worth sharing about.
Oh, it was. It definitely was. And I feel like this is like such really good information for any of our female listeners to like take note of this episode so you can return to it if you're trying to understand the way that the hormonal changes are moving through you. It's not easy. And I was thinking while you were talking, wonder if having a defined ajna affects your like the hormonal shifts that you have, because it's responsible for the endocrine system. Um, and obviously, it's a chemistry that is related to sacral energy as well, but it feels like there might be something else going on there when it comes to the hormones, and like if we have a consistent cycle versus if our cycle is more erratic. And I guess the question, of course, always is it erratic because you're being not self anyway? So it's not like we really can come to like obvious answers about it, but it is an added layer for us as women to have to deal with. I'm thinking about men who have the same hormones that go off in the morning every single day, same thing, they get the same thing every day. And so they don't have this like extreme fluctuation from day to day, and it's just a completely different trip. It's easier to get more specific, probably quicker, about what's happening if you're a guy. Like, is this the not self, or is this just my body doing what it wants to do, right? And this is actually one of the things about being um, an abstract being in general, because Lora has logic and abstract circuitry, so she's got a little bit of everything. Um, but yeah, for me, it's like there is this really like I need to experience things for myself in order to like really understand them, and reflect upon them. And I was going to say something else about the abstract, but now I've managed to lose that thought, which is super annoying, but whatever. Um, this, but yeah, I think it's a really important thing to think about for everyone that is female or was born with female parts. Um, just how, there's this kind of secondary, actually there's multiple different steps that we move through monthly, that make it more confusing and less straightforward. And now I remember what I was going to say about the abstract. There's a quality of like needing to put the rubber to the road with abstractness, and like really seeing what is going on, experientially with it, and not just like in a theoretical way. And I think there's a lot of friction that comes up with women throughout the month that perhaps someone like Ra wouldn't completely understand, and really couldn't speak to, when it comes to the different ways that we are in our cycle versus what the not self is in our cycle, like how are we supposed to show up appropriately, with these fluctuations that are part of our bioform. So anyway, that is, yeah, definitely an interesting line of thought, to go down. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it, Laura?
Yeah, your thoughts made me have thoughts. Which for men, I feel like they could have a taste of it with having emotional definition, because there is that fluctuation day to day of how you're feeling, even though it's not necessarily physiological with your hormones. You are still going
True.
through different vibrational states throughout any given point of time. So it might be a month, it might be several months, it might be a week, it might be like 2 days, like you oscillate, or like if it's individual circuitry, it's like the baseline with the spikes. Like there's different ways in which it shows up. But that's, I feel like, where men can sort of compare if they have emotional definition to what it might feel like being a woman. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying with the ajna center and the pineal gland, and that's a good point. And thinking back to like seven-centered beings, the seven centers relate to different glands. You have your pituitary, your pineal, your thyroid, your pancreas, your adrenal glands, your reproductive glands. There's more. I can't think of them. Did I say seven? I don't know how many I shared. Your thymus gland, maybe that's them all. But anyways, with nine-centered being, like there's not that direct correlation between the glands and the 7 or 9 chakras. But the pineal gland is sort of associated with the ajna, whereas thyroid is associated with the throat, and the it's hard to say them one by one, and the sacral center is associated with the reproductive glands. But there is a symbiosis. The pineal gland and the pituitary work together to regulate all the different endocrine systems. So it's not like a lone wolf. Each one works by itself in its own individual way. There's kind of like communication that happens through all of them. So like if you're having hormone issues with your reproductive gland, that might be because of the reproductive glands themselves, or because of the pituitary, or because of the pineal, and then that might lead to issues with the thyroid or the thymus or something else. Like they're all interwoven. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's complex. It's
Sure,
complex.
sure is. It
Um,
sure is.
I think Martin Grassinger did more study into like the physiological body and the gates. And I want to say gate 9 is associated with the reproductive glands specifically, but I could be wrong about that. Um,
Mm,
but I don't know. I don't know where the correlations are. I think like the spleen in 2644, that channel that's associated with the thymus gland specifically.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
but is that 26 then, or is that 44? I'm not sure where it is specifically. One creates the T cells and one helps regulate the thymus gland. I don't know. So there's nuance. It's not like the overarching center relates to the specific gland, like we could say with the throat and the thyroid. But I don't know if there's a specific point in the body, point in the throat center that is like, oh yes, this is where the thyroid function comes from. I don't know. Anyways, we can bury this if we're done, or if you have anything else you want to say, go for it.
I mean, it's a lot to think about. I mean, it sure is a lot to think about. This is why I love Laura, you guys, because she is going to, I can always count on her to give me the details of something.
I didn't even cover
Like,
the details. I was just like, how can I make this as broad as possible? Because
well,
otherwise I'll like talk for an hour about it.
well, you covered the details to the extent that I cannot. Like, like I'm physically incapable of being able to really, like, that's not the way that I perceive, but it's, yeah, I do love me some really, really specific details. So it's a good counterbalance. I was thinking about this. It's a really good, your focused perspective and my peripheral perspective is like a really good counterbalance, because it's like you keep me honest in a sense. um, because it's like, wait. Okay, like Sarah's right mind is just going, but there's like something that she said that just does not track, and Laura's going to make sure that that I can correct it, so that I don't have to think for the rest of the week, oh man, I said something wrong on the podcast. Now I'm going to have to delete the whole podcast, because as a 1-3, I'm going to say wrong things. That just reminded me. We still reserve the right to be wrong here, okay, everybody, with our right mind. So that's still a thing that's never gone anywhere. And so yeah, I mean, I do appreciate the details of like the body as it relates to human design, and then also as it relates to just being female in this world in general, because it's we're constantly cycling. It never stops. um, but is there anything else you wanted to say on it, Laura?
No, I don't think so. Not on this topic.
Okay. Um, all right. Well, something that I wanted to talk about. So last week when we were talking, I brought up a quote about no choice from Ra. And I'm in a projectors only living your design course right now. And I asked the person leading it, it's Philip Red, in case you want to do a living your design course, what the whole deal with no choice is. And so I wanted to just like reiterate that, because what I said last time, what I said last time was not correct.
I don't even remember what you said last time.
Good. Maybe nobody does. I mean, I was saying it like hypothetically, like being very aware that I wasn't 100% sure about what no choice meant. Um, but basically, there was this audio that I listened to from Raw where he talks about how like we're a deeply mutative species. It's not as locked in as we think. We're talking about no choice. And that confused me, because I was like, I thought we were locked in. And what I found out is that actually the planet, or the solar system, or the entire universe that has created this Maya that we are part of now, it has, like, I guess you could say it's like 4% of 4% of the atomic load. The atoms in the universe are mutative. That's it. There's not more. That's it. And either you get some of the atoms in you, like you get part of that mutative capacity, or you don't. And so you could be studying human design for, you could be following your strategy and authority for years and years and years, and likely your life will get more smooth. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to reach awareness, because if you don't carry the mutative potential to differentiate, then you're not going to. So that's what the no choice is. It's like you either get it or you don't. You either have it or you don't. There's nothing you can do. And if you don't have it, then you're going to stick to the program. which is kind of scary. Laura, do you want to say anything about that?
Makes me think if maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe you're
Maybe
born
she's
with the
born
mutative
with it.
potential to differentiate. Maybe it's the program forcing you to surrender to the program. But okay, I do want to say something, which is like you think about astrology and the movement of the planets, like there is no mutation within the speed of the planets, where the planets will be on a given day at a given time. Like we can calculate what the program's going to say on any given day in the future, in the past. Like that is set in stone. We are on a physical set trajectory through outer space that cannot be changed. Like where we're going through the cosmos, like there are train tracks for us. Like we cannot hop off those train tracks. So when you think about the potential, like there's different ways that those energies can manifest through us with our awareness, like you were saying, if we have the potential for differentiated awareness. But the program is going to program. Like you cannot turn off the program, and the program has a set mechanical, there's like whatever it is. I can't think of the words. I hate when I can't think of the words. Actually, I saw a funny joke somewhere on the internet, was like, when you can't think of the word, pretend that you just say, oh, I can't think of the English word for this thing, to make yourself seem bilingual. I am bilingual, but I wouldn't be able to think of the words in any language, let alone English. But there's a set, I guess, recipe, a formula, like what's going to happen is going to happen astrologically. You can't turn that off. So that makes the whole no choice thing make sense to me in that sense. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Like you're born with it or you're not. Like maybe it's Maybelline. You're either born with mutative potential or you're not. And so that's really
Yeah.
interesting to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, you can follow your strategy and authority and basically like create a more smooth existence for yourself. But that doesn't mean that your passenger gets liberated from its identification with the not self, and with, the well, really with okay, so the other thing that I found out about this week, or I was talking about this week, is that um the mind does not have awareness. It doesn't have any awareness. What the not self is the passenger identifying with the mind, because the mind is a product, a machination built from our openness. So it's literally just like the mind is a program built from our openness, and the passenger is in its identification with the mind, with the projection of our openness. Um, that's when the not self comes in, and I was like, holy, like my brain exploded for a second there, because there's a lot of like the not self mind and this, that, and the other thing, and it really um it just changed my outlook on it, because sometimes when you're just moving through life and your mind is saying things to you, it's easy to be like, oh, it's easy to question whether or not the mind is right, because it may be very convincing, but like by and large, all of the thoughts that you're thinking are programmed, they're part of the program, and they will always be a reflection of your openness. And yeah, and to the extent that we're identified with our openness and in the mind is what creates the distortion in the frequency that turns the self into the not self. Does that make sense, Laura?
Yeah, I have clarifying questions to ask of you.
Yeah.
So when you say this, are you referring to the ajna center as the mind?
I'm referring to the mind as it relates to the the places of openness. So like the Ajna Center has a fixed way of conceptualizing, but that's not the same thing as awareness. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And it's not the same thing as thoughts.
No. Yeah.
So you go ahead.
No. I'm just agreeing.
Yeah. So it's not the same thing as thoughts. Like the having a fixed way of conceptualizing things is the ajna, but it's not the thoughts that we think per se. The thoughts that we think and the way that we come up with the different thoughts are coming from our openness. So yeah, I mean, that kind of just blew my brain open, because I was just like, wait, my mind was, I was like hitting the ring past knot, as Ra would say. I was like, I can't understand what that means. Because it required me to like be like, wow, every single thought that I think is a reflection of my openness and my conditioning. Because of my openness and my identification with it is my not self. So yeah, because I was having this whole like curiosity about it, because the passenger consciousness, the personality side of the design chart, which is also just happens to be, in case there's any astrologers here, your birth chart in astrology. Like, I felt really bad about um empowering the passenger to think that it's in charge of the life by reading people's birth charts, because now they're running around thinking, oh, like I am my mind. They're thinking that they are, the passenger has the awareness, or it has the capacity for awareness, and it's what we think that we think we are. But then the thoughts that are coming through are all just a product of patterns, in the openness. So I felt really bad about giving people, like, kind of empowering their passenger to stay in not self by thinking that it runs the life, um, which was problematic for me with astrology. And it led me to think about how, like, the passenger, it is a point of awareness, and like, how does the mind and the passenger create the not self? How does that happen? And it took me understanding, oh, the mind is not an awareness, it's something different. So yeah, thank you, Philip, for sharing that piece of information with me. Again, that was from class this week. So anyway, uh yeah, do you have anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, it reminds excuse me. It reminds me of a TED talk I listened to once. An actual TED talk, not just like someone self-proclaiming their ramble to be a TED talk, but a TED talk about the psychology. Was it psychology? Just like the brain functioning and how it really would. It's a hallucination. Like the thoughts that we think, everything inside of us is like us hallucinating. So I feel like it's a fitting analogy for the not self mind thinking that it knows what's up, because we're just constantly hallucinating all the time. And that's what our realities actually are. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's humbling to think
Yeah.
that, like, oh, you have all these cool thoughts. Ha ha, joke's on you. It's the not self, and they have no value for you, which is why
Yeah.
people say that the mind, like, definition of the ajna and the head center are for the other.
Yep.
And something Sarah asked me, well, something you asked me, Sarah, I say third person for the audience, but something you said, um, was it last week, the week before, I was asking about my thought process as a 6447 compared to like having 63. You were asking like whether I can imagine things for the future. And actually this segues into a different point. Can I segue us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you were asking about how does my brain work with thinking things of the past versus projecting things into the future? And I was explaining to you the way, like, I have all the thoughts that are me thinking the thoughts, and a lot of these thoughts are like imaginary conversations I have with other people, in my own head, a lot of it. But sometimes my brain, and I say it as like my brain, not me having thoughts, but sometimes my brain will have a thought, and it's not like a thought I'm identifying with, but it's something that is not personal. It's just like information that my brain is conceptualizing and coming to a conclusion about, whether it is about a human design or something else. Sometimes it's like spiritual in nature, or it has different thingamabobs about it, but my brain will come to its own realizations. And we were thinking about and talking about just like the association of the gate 64 of the head with the past versus 63 in the future. And you were asking me, can I imagine things in the future, and like sometimes I can, but it feels very forced. um it's not easy to, and I notice, like when I do, it's not self, it's motivated by not self centers for me to project thoughts of the future or into the future and think about what could be or what might or might not happen. It's from a place of proving oneself, it's from a place of trying to get free of pressure or looking for direction or identity or love or whatever, all of those things, for my openness. But you compelled me to ask a question in the groups. And so I asked it in the human design and astrology group about like, how do the 63 fours experience thoughts? Like, what is it like for them? And I thought it was really funny the way I, not thinking I'm funny, I'm thinking it was funny the way I phrased it, as like, in hindsight, not intentionally funny, but just like, oh, look what I did. Was I was asking about it experientially. I was like, what is your lived experience? Which is very abstract. Like, what has been
Yes.
your like skin in the game lived experience of this logical thing? And like logic is like projecting hypothetical patterns. So it's like very silly of me to ask it that way, and I didn't necessarily get the answers I was looking for. But I didn't have that much energy to contribute to the conversation after I asked that question, so it's fine, whatever. But yeah, I was just thinking about that and the whole like projecting something into the future. And so this segues me into my point. Well, hey, if you're in the audience and you have 63-4 and you're self-aware of your thought process, whether it's you're not self or you thinking it's actually you in charge of your own thoughts, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to me and explain it to me. I'm curious to hear. But anyways, the segue is I told you this, Sarah, but I was imagining going to the dermatologist because I got a referral to get a mole removed. And I was planning on like, what else am I going to tell the doctor? Mentally preparing myself before I go. Not self things, right? Like, I feel like this is somehow related to my not self. Trying to be free of the pressure. So preparing myself so I know what I'm going to say before I go. Anyways, also, this is sort of an update on my dermatillomania, which I talked about at some point previously on an episode. I had a phase, I think like Christmas onwards of 3 weeks. Like I had a phase where I did not pick my skin. And so it was interesting to be like, oh, look, the body is doing the thing. It's being motivated. It has a controlled willpower. It's putting in the effort to maintain self-improvement in this way. Okie dokie. And I watched it and it turned off after 3 weeks. And I was like, I guess we're going back to our habits, our unhealthy habits. And I went back to picking my skin. And very occasionally I will get infected hair follicles. Sorry if this is TMI and you're sensitive about bodily functions. I am not such a person. Anyways, very occasionally I will get infections because the bacteria will get into the hair follicle. And usually it happens on airplanes because the air of airplanes is so poor quality. So when I travel, I'll get infections. But like I haven't had an infection in like, I don't know, 2-3 years since I traveled. Very long time. And then me just thinking about telling the doctor that sometimes when I travel, I get skin infections manifested. Well, not in the human design terminology of manifested, but it self-actualized into me getting a skin infection. And so now I'm dealing with like 2 different follicles of my leg, which are infected and trying to heal it. And I usually try to heal it naturally, but I think I just need an antibiotic. And it's just frustrating. And I told Sarah this and I joked, like, why can't I manifest a husband this easily to like speak something into existence? So I wonder how much of this is gate 63 projecting into the future and it sort of self-actualizing in whatever way that magic works sometimes, if we're going to believe in it or not. I don't know. No choice. No choice. There is a fixed trajectory, however that works with manifestation, which I think maybe should be one of our topics one episode, because I feel like so many people enter into the Facebook groups asking about manifestation, and like maybe it's dwindled down a bit. I haven't noticed as much, but for a very long time people were coming in and asking about it, myself included. And then all like the more weathered human design folks are like, no, just stop, please. don't bring that up. Like, it's their manifestations not within the world of human design. Like, they don't equate to one another. So maybe it'd be fun to go into more detail on another day with that. But manifesting a husband. I told Sarah this also, and I want to bring it up. And this relates to something Sarah was looking into. Sarah came across the quote where Ra says, if you see a single definition person reading a romance book, shoot them, which is
On the
a
spot. Shoot them
well-circulated
on
quote.
the spot.
On the
Sorry.
spot, not just trying to like on the spot kill them. And like y'all know, I've been reading my romance books. And anyways, the whole husband manifestation. I told you this, Sarah, but like I came to realize that I do want a partner. And for a very long time, I've been thinking about this, and I'm going to overthink about it, thinking about how I think about it. It's really my not self thinking about it. But questioning desire for a partner, desire for a relationship, desire for anything as being something that is of the mind, of the not self mind. Because if the body wants it, the body does it without the mind needing to think that the body wants it. Or I don't know what the other or I forgot what the other or was in my head. But I had this sort of thought pattern about desire. Was it a year ago? A year and a half ago? I don't know how long ago it was. But I was wondering what does desire look like in the body regarding desire motivation, regarding like the ego center, wanting things, whether it's the solar plexus, wanting things, wanting experiences, whether it's specifically gate 30, the gate of desire. How does desire show up? Because for a lot of time, I don't desire things. And recently I've been noticing more and more desires of wanting to do certain crafts, wanting to knit a specific item or sew a specific item, wanting a husband or a partner, for example. And for a long time, I don't identify with said desires. And so this is like a very weird and consequential, like very segmented thought process idea where it's strung together to form incoherent sentences for me to say, let's talk about desire, not in the sense of like it being the motivation that puts desire into someone else, which I realized you were saying something before, and I was like, oh, desire motivation. The not self mind and awareness. Sorry, backtracking for a second. When you were talking about the not self mind, something about it. Oh dear, I can't remember what you said. But I was like, oh, motivation is the manifestation of the passenger being aware. Because it's when the passenger is aware and sees the way it's supposed to see, it can share its experience with the other in a way that evokes the motivation in the other of what the motivation is in the person. So we evoke desire, and I think this was connected to you not wanting to do astrology readings anymore because you felt awkward empowering other people to live their lives a specific way, thinking that they have control. But I feel like that's what our motivation does to people.
Yeah.
It puts
Yeah.
them in that locked in desire state that says like, yeah, I can do the thing. But is it correct? I don't know. Ra had desire motivation, and he's like out here still in the ethers since he passed on, convincing everyone follow your strategy and authority, thinking we have control over the process. He's still doing it after
Yeah.
he's dead, and that's just like how desire motivation works. Anyways,
No, that's a good point. And that well taken too, because the thing that I was thinking primarily is not so much about, not being locked into astrology, but more about it's kind of like the not self mind is already what runs the show, or the not self, which is again the passenger's identification with the openness, which is the mind. So to the extent the passenger identifies with the mind is the extent that it's in its not self. And so in a sense we are supposed to lock people in we're supposed to pull that feeling out of them, since we're both right oriented and both have desire motivation. But it's the fact that it was like, I'm missing the most important part here in astrology, which is the form principle. Like, the form principle is nowhere to be found in traditional astrology or modern astrology. I mean, we look at the moon and we say the moon is the body, right? And I do think, to a greater or lesser extent, that looking at the moon in the personality chart can be very telling about how well someone's passenger mind, their passenger consciousness is getting along with the form consciousness, the design body. I think people who have more harmonious moons or more harmonious placements of their moon, like Taurus or like trining Venus or Jupiter, things like that, conjoin these planets, they're going to have a way better experience, I think, of the juxtaposition of these two crystals than someone who has a more difficult, like Pluto square moon, which is someone like me has. So there's something to be said about the body still being in the chart, but what the body is here to do is nowhere to be found in traditional astrology or modern astrology, because we're looking strictly at what the passenger is learning. We're not looking at what the body, what's correct for the physicality. Now, I know that they are juxtaposed, and it's like, you put two things together and it creates a third thing. They're not one or the other, but there is just something to be said about not letting people know about the unconscious aspects of themselves and kind of further phase locking them into the identification with the mental plane. And the idea of like the concept of like control. The manifestation thing too is definitely something that we could talk about. It was funny because I don't know if you saw this, Laura, but on the projector's Facebook page, someone with some balls, she had a defined ego, and the 2551, she had two gates defined in the ego, or two channels from the ego out, said, is it just that like everyone who's living by their strategy and authority is just going to be like poor? Like, is that in the projectors group? And like, I didn't go through all of the questions, but I thought it was really funny because insofar as manifestation, like, a lot of times I think the reason that manifestation like seems to work for people is because they're manifesting what they aren't, and they have electromagnetic channels to pull those things that they aren't to them. So that's one little tidbit about manifestation, of like, if they're manifesting from the not self, then in a sense it is following the program, and they may get the electromagnetics of what they aren't thinking, what they aren't attracted to them. And then, to just backpedal to the Facebook question about like the money, this is not a glamorous life. Like, the reason that I'm doing this, and I don't know if Laura's reason is more because she loves the knowledge, and you can answer this in a second, Laura, or if it's because you truly want to change the way that your life is. Like, is it like a knowledge-based thing, or is it like an experiential thing? Because you're both. You have abstract and logical circuitry. But this is more about finding who it is that you really are and being it, like 100%, and being beyond comparison. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have truckloads of cash at your disposal. Doesn't mean that you don't, but there's usually something going on in the not self when it comes to hoarding money like that anyway. So it was a good question, and I don't I don't love the fact that it does seem that way. And I think part of the reason too that it does seem that way is because we have not hit 2027 yet. Ra has said many times over that 2027 is when projectors really need to be ready to guide, because that's when we're not going to have any tribal glue holding everybody together. So there's a potentiality too that like what we're doing is against the background frequency. Essentially, as we decondition, what we're doing is against the program until the program and the background frequency shifts. And so I don't think anyone has enough information yet to see if being a projector just means being poor. I think what it means is being a projector means taking a long time to decondition, and being willing to do it no matter what the cost is. And then we're going to wait and see what it looks like when we have the real fucking deal projectors out there making moves, you know, non-energetic moves, but like, you know, being being who it is that they are, and guiding, and what that kind of energy exchange looks like on a material level. So I don't know if you want to mention anything or comment on anything from that, Laura.
Yeah, I saw that question and I laughed too. I didn't respond and I didn't read any of the comments, but my initial mental response was like, some people are meant to be sick and some people are just inherently healthy, and there's different diversity within that, or some people are just this or that, and like there's, again, no choice in it. And just because like human design isn't for richness, which is like you brought up the point of like, why am I doing it? In the beginning, it was like, how can I make money correctly as myself? How can I be financially independent as myself? And like the first programs that I was interested in purchasing on Jovian Archive were the material ones about money. So if that's the not self, then I don't know what is, or if that's not the not self, then I don't know what is. But yeah, I think it depends. It's not like a one size fits all. It's not like everyone's supposed to be poor, everyone's supposed to be rich. Like there's differences, just like we're all supposed to have different experiences with everything, whether it is romance or money or health or what have you. Um, those are my 2 cents on that. But there is something else. What was it? I forgot. I forgot the other thing I wanted to
That's
say.
okay. I mean, I just mentioned, yeah, like do
Oh,
you go ahead, go.
it was about Richard Rudd. He, in the prosperity sequence, it talks about prosperity and like when you're living your pearl and you are expressing your essence correctly, then I was interrupted, sorry. If you are expressing your essence correctly, so living out yourself, living out your definition, then your pearl sequence gets expressed correctly, and that will result in prosperity, which again isn't necessarily financial prosperity. It's prosperity with like the material world, which is sometimes a lack thereof. Like sometimes your own experience of prosperity is experiencing a lack of having things around you. Simplicity. I'm speaking for myself because I think I have my pearl in like the first line, and whoever has the first line is supposed to experience simplicity. Some people are here to experience more than the bare minimum of financial prosperity. Um, but I think there might be something to look in on that level. I forgot what your Jupiters are. I think it's Jupiter.
It's personality Jupiter or design?
One is culture, one is the pearl. I can't remember which is which.
Um,
48 1. So it's personality, which is the
I think it's
pearl.
33.6. I think it's one of my only 6 lines.
I don't know what the sixth line means. I forgot.
All right,
I
great.
see you
Thanks.
can bring it up as if I know, but I don't know what the details are. I just know my own, which is haha. You're not supposed to have anything. You have to struggle. I'm not struggle, but like more will not necessarily equate to the sensation of prosperity with life.
Well, and
So
I get that though, because I feel like I mean, simplicity is just a line one thing. You could put whatever word you want to put on it as line one, when it comes to Jupiter. But like for me, like as a cave person, if I had like a mansion, I wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it. Like I want my cave. I want a small cave. You know, like just that's all I need. It's all I need, and that's all I want. And so it's like I understand the value. It's my line one personality talking, but I understand the value in that sense of like, you know, people are buying all of the shit that they don't even like or want or need. I would like to have a good amount of energy coming in, material abundance coming in, so that I can take care of my body to the best of my ability. You know, feed it the best foods that are like healthy and have like good trainers, like people to teach me how to exercise and lift weights and shit like that correctly, so that I can, you know, basically just honor the vessel, because I spent so much time treating it like shit. So, I mean, if anything, for money, I've come down to the realization, and it took me literally like shattering my life, shattering so many times to be here, is the only thing that I want is my body to be healthy and happy, and maybe not even happy, but just like healthy and vibrationally in integrity. But however that looks, of course I like buying shit. There's all kinds of shit that I like buying, um but yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing. And it's, you know, the girl was like, I think it was a girl that posted this, she was like waiting for, you know, people to start like coming after her. And I just really think, you know, like what we were talking about in the beginning, the awareness thing, there could be hundreds of thousands of people in human design too, that only 4% of them are going to reach the state of, you know, where maybe their pearl is actually working for them correctly. And it isn't just a matter of them removing some of the resistance in their lives by following strategy and authority. The mental plane is super dense. I mean, it's so dense. It's so hard to spring yourself out of, because everybody else is living there too. You know, I remember one of the things that Lora said on one of our podcasts, I can't remember which one, but she was like out and about, and somebody asked her what human design was. And it's like, she's like, oh, so you don't make decisions with your mind. And they were like, why would I want to do that? Like, why would I? Because that's where we meet each other. That is where we have like our relationships, is on the mental plane. And yeah, it's not going to be easy to just get out of that and be living correctly as yourself, to the extent that you're in full faith and surrender, right? And you're not making decisions based on fear, your not self's fear, you know, your openness fear, all of that stuff, to the point where you actually can get in the right rooms with the right people who recognize you, to the extent that everything that you're doing, you're getting energy for, right? So that's like a projector ideal. And I don't think anyone has realized it yet. I don't know that anyone has realized it yet. Like, that's profound to think about, that we're at the bottom floor of this thing, that there are going to be people who are studying this, just starting to study this. There's going to be people that study this after we die, more than likely, if if there's enough right-minded people that are able to transmit the information. um it's a profound thing to think that this information is here. Projectors are babies. None of us have really figured out how to do it properly yet. And so like the answers that were given in the thread, it's like, maybe, I'm not sure that anyone that answered it um is their true selves, you know, is operating with their correct motivation, is got the right awareness, like all of the things, you know. I'm just not sure. So yeah, do you want to comment?
It makes me think of people talking about Taylor Swift because
Yeah.
she has reached financial success and people think she might be a projector. And so they're naturally equating success with success on the material plane, and that's not what success means. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, Taylor Swift is probably living out of her not self, like most of us are. We can't help it. It's how the program functions for people to live out of our not selves. And yeah, it just makes me think of her. And like, there's some other person, I can't remember if I've talked about her on the podcast or not, but she's a life coach. And she went from being completely broke and living in her car and like not having a job and not having any sense of income to being a multimillionaire who whose business makes multi-millions each year. And she's a manifesting generator with a defined ego, I think with 2644. And she has 45, I think, as part of her cross. Like her, if you look at her body graph, it seems like very immersed in tribalism and the material plane. I think she might also have 5432. but just like
My God.
lots of material energy. And so like and she knows she's a manifesting generator. I don't know how true she is to her design, but she's aware of it, and she's aware of her having a sacral response. And she's gotten to this point of having a shit ton of money and using it to the best of her abilities to raise women up and show them that they too can have a shit ton of money if they want, if it's correct for them. But
If you're talking about who I think you're talking
her
about,
name's Melanie Lair.
yeah, there's been so much shit talked about her online though, and
Oh,
like,
I haven't seen it.
oh,
Well,
okay.
like,
Well, I'm not gonna get into it on the podcast, but it's like, keep
I
going.
mean,
I'll
I
let you
get it.
keep
Like,
going.
I can see how she's telling people to do things as if they have the power to do it. Like, we don't all have her body graph. I would say, like, looking at her body graph, she seems capable of doing what she's doing and saying, like, I value these things, and convincing other people to spend money that they may or may not have on learning what she has to teach. Like, it's very ego-centered driven. But like, whether we all have the capacity to reach her level of material success, I think is completely inaccurate, because we have different body graphs, we have different purposes, different paths of differentiation, and our fate is not the same as hers, whether it is our true self fate or not self fate, whichever, her trajectory through life. And so yeah, this post also made me think about that, how some people just have different financial experiences of life. And then when we
Yeah.
can go into the frou-frou, it's not necessarily frou-frou, but it's like the non-human design, more spiritual community path of just like, we have ancestral karma that we're carrying. And if you have ancestors that are carrying the genetic burden of struggle, financial struggle, like, our DNA is going to carry that and bring it forth. Going back to the hormonal womanly thing, like, you existed in your grandmother. When your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, you were inside your grandmother. All of our eggs develop I'm pretty sure it's the third trimester of pregnancy. So all the eggs you have in your body were there inside of you as the fetus inside of your mother. So there is like this, it's really silly that we carry our father's last names, because there's such a strong maternal lineage through all of us, because we physically existed as cells, as matter, way before we were born, before our mothers were
Well,
born.
I'd like to just comment that the design crystal does come from the sperm,
Yes, but the
but
matter that, I mean, that programs the cell to develop into the form, but the matter is still there, and the matter
yes,
is subjected to the laws of the universe.
agreed, agreed.
But yeah, good point. Anyways, we have, I think, maternal ancestral karma that we're all carrying. And so that's another point, whether you believe it or not, to think that like your maternal lineage carries hefty weight of the past, of struggle, and how it's not necessarily possible for everyone to break free of those chains, to change their relationship to the material world. Like
Well,
Sarah
think
said,
about
4%
it.
of
Go
4%.
ahead.
Like, we're not
Yeah.
mutative. We think we're mutative, but
Yeah.
we're not.
Yeah, and think about it. Like, okay, your dad married your mom. I'm not saying that this is totally true for Laura, but just as a hypothetical, because he was attracted to what he is not. And so then, and your mom is attracted to what she's not. So the genetic more than likely, if they're operating as not selves, the genetic imperative is the reason that they're attracted to each other, not because of what is similar and the same within them, but because of what is different. And so, just to say that it's like the pattern that your mom was trying to fill. So, like for me, it's the 2644. But let's say my mom had a father whose mom also was attracted to him because of being different and opposite. It's like you're carrying all of those people that have essentially mated due to the genetic imperative. You're carrying their imperative to also want to find what is similar. It's why you see so many people who like have the same channels or definition as like they're people dating people who have like the same charts or definition as their parents, you know, because you're creating this not self pattern that just has gone back so far that you couldn't even imagine like where it started. So, you know, this is also why we identify with what we aren't, because our parents are identifying with what they aren't. And their parents were identifying with what they weren't, you know? So it goes and it goes and it goes. And that's why when you're thinking about yourself and the term, like, what is a chain breaker? Something else that was said by Philip when I was taking class is that, like, what we're doing with human design is essentially breaking the covenant of the program. It's the only way. Otherwise, we're just constantly stuck in this manifesting what was true for our, you know, from our past, from our families, um, and repeating the same patterns over and over and over and over and over and over and over again ad infinitum. So it's just an interesting thing to think about when it comes to um, the fact that like our parents were super homogenized, not selves. Everything that we learned from them, our earliest conditioning was from people who are super homogenized, not selves. Their definition imprinted in us to create more of this not self behavior. So it's, I mean, when I say the mental plane is dense, the not self is dense. It is dense. And it's going to be a miracle if there is enough projectors that differentiate, um, you know, for 2027 and beyond.
Yeah. It's scary, but also not.
we're like whatever, you know, whatever, it's fine. We're just gonna be I'm just gonna be under my heated blanket hopefully, and everything will be okay. Is there okay, so is there anything else that we wanted to cover? I'm sure that there was, but I don't
Well,
remember.
we we tangented off what I was saying before. So I don't know if it's
Sorry,
relevant
wait, what were you
anymore.
saying? What were you saying? What were you
Well, I wanted
saying?
to talk about relationships and how you saw the quote for like single definition if they're reading a romance novel.
Oh, yes, yes. Wow, we really went far afield after that. Go
Well,
ahead.
it's because I backtracked us, and then the backtrack got us into this cool land. But all worth saying, I'll say in my book. But yeah, I wanted to talk about relationships. And so you recently listened to that series in which Rod talks about was it the poetry of keynoting, looking at different charts based on their definition and whether they're single definition or double or regular split or triple split or whatever it is. Um, and
I
so
can't remember.
I
I'll
just
get
wanted to
back to
share
you.
for a long time, like I was questioning my desire for a relationship because I could tell it was my not self. I could tell for it was my we have a Pisces sun and a Pisces moon here. So Sarah's a Pisces sun and I have a Pisces moon. We're romantics. Well, at least I'm a romantic, but an idealistic delusional romantic. So for so long, like I've craved that relationship. And like just Sarah just said, it's not self-programming because it's my open G looking for love, looking for that sense of wholeness and completion. And so ever since learning human design, I've been reconsidering this being as a part of my self-proclaimed identity of like wanting a partner because I could see how much it was driven by my not self, wanting just mainly G center, but I guess like all the others are a piece of it too. Wanting that other person in my life and then seeing, oh, haha, your split definition. You're not necessarily built for partnerships. You're here to experience that. It's like not in the cards for you and all these things. Not necessarily that like no split definition is not supposed to be in a relationship. Like there's plenty of mental projectors who are single definition who are happily in relationships that are correct for them. Um, but it's just trying to look at myself objectively of like what is it that I want and why do I want it? And coming to terms with desire and realizing that sometimes like questioning the origins of desire and wondering, is it the not self mind that desires because of that seeking for the openness to be complete? Or at what point is desire correct? Is it true for us to have some sort of experience that our forms desire and want to have made manifest? I don't know. I want to
I
hear your
don't
thoughts about
know.
it.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's a really good question to, and just to say um the audio that I was listening to was one about split definitions, that like a class about split
Okay,
definitions
it
that
was
Rob
different.
gave. So it wasn't the poetry of keynoting, but he does go into it because this was like, me and Laura have talked about this a lot, in the fact that split definitions were like built for bonding. Like that's part of, we're conditioning everyone else into bonds. But Ra actually says at the end that it's not that splits and splits should just be together. Splits are the ones that are supposed to be able to essentially teach the single and the triple split definition people, or the zero definition people, reflectors, how to be in relationship and see the value in it, when it goes beyond being exactly what you want, right? Because it's like we have an ideal of what a relationship is. And like, I think, Laura, you would agree that, if you could have your ideal relationship, then that would be great. But when the rubber hits the road, right, when the logical pattern meets the abstract experiential way, relationships are far more difficult and challenging, and it's way easier for people who are split and triple split or have no definition to just be out, because the other person's not being what it is that they thought that they were, at the outset. And so, the split definition person basically is willing to put in the work to make the relationship work and help teach the others about the value. Because, again, it's all well and good to I like want a relationship that's ideal, but when you're thinking about the reality of most relationships, they don't look like a lot of fun. Like when you're in, they don't look like a lot of fun to be in. So, and that's primarily because we're in a deeply not self world. But just to say that, it's not the relationship that you want, it's the right kind of communion with another person that you want, which is a distinction. And I think that um, yeah, it was just, it is hard to understand where the impetus is coming from, right? And this is the problem that I have all the time, because obviously I have an emotional center. Obviously I mean, Laura said I have desire, motivation. I have the 3041, which has to do with desire too. And then there's what the not self wants, which is like all of the stuff in my openness. And it's like, how do I know that my body hasn't been co-opted by my not self mind to um to want things that are homogenized cultural values and not what actually I want? And I think that the only answer to that is like the 7-year deconditioning process, because my mind and my emotional center, my authority, are still like deeply, I don't want to say enmeshed, but it's like there's not necessarily a real clear feeling yet about what it is that it I mean, there's a lot of things that I used to want, and I think you can pretty much check in with yourself about how far you've come. If you stopped wanting things that are culturally significant success mile markers, um, if you stopped wanting those things, like, then likely, you're moving in the direction of really like desiring what is there to be correctly desired by your body in this lifetime. But I don't think that it's going to be something that you're going to immediately have access to, because you have to unwind the mind. I mean, forgive the rhyme, but that's what it is. Until it gets unwound around everything, you're not going to know. And I've thought about this as a split definition. It's like relationships, relationships. I'm like a fucking bloodhound. I'm like, ooh, do I have a crush on this person? Like sniffing around, like wondering, for waiting for a relationship. And like it's there's a correctness to me wanting to seek a relationship out, in the sense that I'm looking for something to make that feeling of wholeness, but I can't identify with it because then I'm identifying with my not self. So, I mean, everything comes down to strategy and authority. It really does. But it also comes down to like the cellular deconditioning, because we're not going to know what's the real versus what's the not. And like, there's certain things that my not self mind is like it is gripping tightly onto, like the notion of relationships, and that relationships would make my life better than it is right now, like that idea in general. Is that true? Maybe not, I don't know. But I don't think I answered anything, but
No, you
that's
did. Well,
okay.
maybe not that there was a question. I just wanted to hear your right-mindedness in response to the topic. But what you said was really valuable, and I appreciated listening to it, and I'm sure the rest of our audience did as well.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'm happy because sometimes Ross says things and it's just so upsetting to my stomach, but he'll say something the opposite, like in another lecture, right? So like one of the things that he has said is that shoot a fucking single definition person if they're reading a romance novel on the spot. And then he also said, but no, the split definitions aren't supposed to just be the split definitions. Like, we're here to create the tension, or we're here to be in productive tension with the single and the triple splits. And
I
so,
think with that, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like people who learned from him directly have said that there was like jokes. So a lot of the things he said wasn't meant to be taken literally because
no,
you
of
could
course
hear the
not.
audience laughing in response to whatever it was that he said. So I feel like some things
I
are lost in
know.
translation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, definitely don't shoot anyone that's reading a romance novel. Like, I think we can all come to terms with that. Um, but yeah, it's a good question. One thing I want to say, we're really, we went over, I don't know what over is, but we've been talking for a while now. That in my experiment, what I've noticed recently, insofar as, and this is a tangent, this is not related to what was just being said, is that my body has gotten way more comfortable with my PHS or my determination. So I have I'm calm touch, and so I started eating by myself, and it caused a lot of ripples and a stir in the house that I'm staying in with my family, because there's a deep tribalness here, and it was upsetting to people when I was doing that. But now, all of the dust is settled, everything's gone back to normal. We've accepted, like, by and large, everyone in the house has accepted my eating patterns. um and I just wanted to say, like, there is going to be friction and tension when you break the covenant with what it was that you were. And that resistance in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, because in the moment when it was all going down and everything was happening and there was like high stress over it and I had to have difficult conversations, I was like, is it even worth it? Like, is it worth it to follow this? Like, am I being ridiculous? Am I being a pain in the ass for no reason? All of the things. And I just want to say it is indeed worth it, and things will become far smoother after you take care of kind of the dirty laundry, and you take it out. Things will be a lot less complicated. So I just wanted to say that, insofar as my own experiment of having to deal with the resistance and people around me who don't understand why I do things in such a stringent and specific way, that it can lead to like greater outcomes in the end, and less resistance overall. And I think that is just, for me, I'm like, wow, okay, I see. Like, when you get past that initial resistance, you do get into more smooth sailing, but you have to go through resistance time and time again. In the very beginning, it is what it is. So that was just my little anecdote from this past week of just reflecting on being calm, determination, and having to eat on my own, and how it was hard in the beginning, and now it isn't. So yeah, Laura, do you want to say anything on that, or are you
Yeah.
ready
Yeah.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
one, it's great to hear. I feel like part of the dust settling comes from transits changing. Like when something happens and we have certain transits, we identify with the experience in a certain way because we're having certain thoughts due to the neutrinos of consciousness affecting us in a certain way. And then as we wait, the dust settles, the transits change and shift, and then we can move out of it with grace. Um, and so I feel like that's why time just helps heal lots of wounds, because we have to dissociate from the transits associated with things happening. And then I unintentionally, but intentionally sort of said grace. I feel like this was your 22 showing. Sarah, to call you out on your chart, she's split definition, as you know, and so her two bridge gates are 35 and 22. And so often I feel like the dominant theme for you is 35 because your sun is in 36. And it's like two bridging manifesting gates. And 22 is a lot more subtle, a lot more difficult to notice. But what you said just now, you're in the moment, like of the process of everything happening with the resistance and the friction. You had the thought, or you said you had the thought, if you can recollect it exactly, was, um, is it worth it? Because it was causing the disharmony. I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was causing disharmony between the relationships of you and your family members. And I feel like 22 likes harmony. It likes grace. It likes things to be pretty and effortless and smooth and flowy. It's like the acoustic nature of the emotional center when things are just musical. Like if you listen to a beautiful piece of music, it sounds nice and it makes you feel good. And so it doesn't want to be in dissonance. Not to like use those words because they're human design words, but because they're melodic words, and 1222 is acoustic. With the wave of 1222, like if it's in dissonance and things aren't nice to listen to, and it creates that icky feeling of like nail scratching on a chalkboard. So it's, you were avoiding that with the grace. You wanted it to be graceful. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
your 22 showing.
Well, can I just ask you, since we're still here, and you said you see the 35 show up a lot,
Yeah.
is that in like my wanting to have experiences? Is that what you mean when you say
Yeah.
you see it showing up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I've started to see it too, because ultimately those are like my 2 points of like deep wisdom. Like those two places are like where I'm here to be like fucking superstar wise about. If all goes according to, deconditioning. But it's, yeah, I mean, it was hard for me to disidentify with them, because that's what had to happen in order for me to see the conditioning in and of itself. Because I'm like, I'm a harmonious person or whatever. I want to be that, or I want to be that open person. And I had that example too show up for me, like in class. I'm right-minded, and I'm taking a class with, of course, all projectors, but there's plenty of strategic projectors. And I feel really strategic if I try to ask a question. So it's like if I am, but I feel the pressure on me, right? The 35 not self pressure of being open to like the environment. So I'm like, I feel this feeling of like, Sarah, you should ask a question, you should ask a question, you should ask a question, get involved, be a part of the group, do all this stuff. And I feel that pressure, and I'm like, but that's not, if I try and ask a question because I just want to be part of what, everyone else is, participating, then I am in not self, because I'm strategizing. So there was like a quality that I realized, and this was so true as for me as a young child, that I was so quiet and reserved. And part of why I started drinking was to have that 35, that openness, to experiences. So I wasn't so afraid, because I didn't have it naturally. And I thought that's the only thing that I was missing. If I could just express what it is that I wanted to express, if I could just not be afraid of having these experiences, then I wouldn't have to drink. Right. So there was like a whole lot of stuff that's like tied up in those two channels for me. And it's taken, this is a long process. And I really actually have just hit the 3.5 year mark of sleeping on my own and following my strategy and authority, generally speaking. Although I've made a lot of mistakes, big ones on the way. But nonetheless,
There are no mistakes. There's only lessons.
I know. Well, no. Okay. One other thing. One other thing. The only thing that's like, it's never wrong for a third line person to fail. The only problem is making the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
And it's the absolute like the horror, the most horrifying aspects of my life are in the places where I didn't learn from the mistakes that I made. So yeah, I mean, it's for a 5'1", you guys probably have a lot less mistakes flying around. I don't know how many third lines you have, but for me, I don't mind making mistakes anymore. I just really desperately want to learn from them now. But no choice, right? As we started out with. Anyway, all right, we're gonna creep up on 2 hours here if we don't cut it now. Laura, do you want to include anything before we close?
I have gotten no feedback on the adventures of Randall Thor with seeing if anyone else wants to read The Wheel of Time with us. So I'll refresh your memory.
I need to read it. I really need to. It will happen. I just don't know exactly at what point in space-time. What, space-time locale will happen, but it will. So
well,
yeah, you guys.
Not just you, but like if anyone in the audience wants to participate too, like they haven't reached out. So just reminding y'all, but I feel like at this point people stop listening because it's the end of the podcast. So
well, you never know.
Still with us.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking around. If you have, we are at Projector Stories on Instagram. I just made a Facebook page for us at Projector Stories. We're Projector Stories Podcast on YouTube. And yeah, I hope everyone has a good, oh my gosh, there's so many things. We'll have to talk about them next week. A good week. And Laura?
Catch you on the flip side.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.